Right, hello everyone. This video is going to be going through the social influence part of the specification in terms of preparing for the 2025 summer exams for Paper 1 Psychology. I'm obviously not going to be going through the whole of social influence, that'd be crazy, that's 6 weeks of teaching, but and there are other videos for that and podcasts for that for you to have a look at. But it was more just to highlight some things worth thinking about, looking over past exam questions that have come up and what tends to come up for social influence, because sometimes there's a pattern to these things. So, as you know, social influence is the first thing that you are going to be addressing when you open paper one. Typically an easy. It's one. I think it's one of the easier topics to go for. Three named pieces of research, which I'll go through. Obviously, the first half of it is more conformity and obedience. Now, you do need to know the difference between the two, and I know that might be, a bit patronising, but it's often confused in the exams. So, in particular, the variables get confused. Both the variables for conformity often get confused with the variables for obedience. So in your revision, just make sure you are doing something to separate them. With conformity, the variables are group size, unanimity, and task difficulty. But specifically, you need to know what Ash did when he explored those things. So what did he do to the group task? And I've had students recently say, he made the group bigger. I was like, yeah, that's true, but he put firstly one Confederate with the naive participant. He put two Confederates, then three, then four, and basically, and you also need to know what he found as well. So you need to know statistics. You need to know what he actually did. You need to know the same, but for excuse me, Milgram. With Milgram, you specifically need to know proximity and location. How did he vary that? You also need to know about uniform as well, but Bickman supports that quite nicely, I think. Looking through as we go on, we've got explanations for why we resist. Two, that's an easy bullet point. Two very simple explanations. And then towards the end, for students, it certainly gets harder. Now, minority influence is a big bullet point. Yes, consistency, commitment, flexibility, but you've also got snowball effect, you've got augmentation principle, you've got Moscovici, who, whilst not named in the specification, and you're not going to get asked a question specifically on Moscovici, but you really do need to know him. The last one is the hardest bullet point, and it's probably the one you should be focusing on. Not necessarily the most, but you need to know what is meant by the role of social change or social influence processes in social change. Now, the reason why I say that is because if I get up what has come up for the last, 7-8 years, everything has come up within 3 years apart from social change processes. Now, that's not to say it's guaranteed to come up, but it is certainly more likely going to come up. Now, it could come up as one marker, then AQA have done their job, It could come up as a simple multiple choice question, and then AQA can say, look, we've asked that question every 3 years, fine. Or it could come up as an 8 marker. I'm not entirely convinced it would come up as a 16 marker. It's only ever come up as 6 marker. In fact, in 8 years, it's only had 12 marks worth of questions. And I'm not going to go over social change processes, but I will highlight the sorts of questions that have come up excuse me, beforehand. Now, the other thing just to pay attention to as well is that there is a bullet point in social influence that has come up even fewer times, or in terms of marks, and it's Zimbardo. Now, there is a theory to Zimbardo, conformity to social roles, i.e. if I give you a social role, you will conform to it. That's the theory. Zimbardo has been booted off the spec, unceremoniously close to him actually dying, which was a bit of a shame. But there's only ever been 6 marks on Zimbardo. Yes, it's been taken off the spec, not for your year, but for later years. They might want to give Zimbardo a farewell. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I'm not predicting this. As we get closer to the exam, you're going to have loads of people on YouTube, loads of your teachers start coming up with and you're going to see it on the internet, loads of predicted papers. They are guesses, like the same way I'm kind of guessing. I'm not predicting it's going to come up, but I'm just highlighting that it has been a little while since it has. If it doesn't come up this year, if Zimbardo doesn't come up this year, if social change processes don't come up this year, then it doesn't come up this year. But I do think they are ones to watch, but I'm not kind of predicting that they are going to come up. One thing to note, though, there wasn't a 16 marker last year. In social influence, at least, they've never gone 2 years without a 16 marker. So on the balance of probability, you are probably going to get a 16 marker this year. I don't think it would be social change processes, but I mean, it could be a 646 essay, social change processes. That would be reasonable and logical. But I would expect a 16 marker in this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we're not, certainly at the college I work at, we are not making any major predictions this year, because the way AQA have played it, most things have come up within the last 3 years. And that's really what your predictions are based off. If it hasn't come up in 3 years, it's very likely to, like social change processes. But that should be noted, social change processes is the only thing I'm remotely confident is coming up this year. And even then, I may still be wrong. So it's worth bearing in mind. Now, as I said, there are 3 studies here, and you need to know every single thing about them. Theoretically, you could be asked a 16 marker on them, in which case you would need to know everything about the procedure, the results, the conclusions, and then 3 to 5 decent peels for an AO3, depending on what type of question you get. So Ash, Zimbardo, and Milgram. Yes, you need to know Moscovici, though he's not named in the spec. Yes, you need to know about a bit about Rotter and a few pieces of research here. Obviously, there's Bickman, Hoffling. Sorry. There's a lot of small pieces of research, but you need to know these 3 named pieces of research. The other reason why I say this, by the way, is because they haven't really been asked that many questions. They have not really been asked that many questions over the 8 years. Ash, Milgram, Zimbardo, particularly Zimbardo. The last thing I want to go into before I look at social change processes a little bit are these sorts of questions just here. Now, this has only really ever happened in social influence, but you get sometimes these really odd summative questions which don't really fit into one bullet point in particular. They ask about social influence generally. This doesn't happen anywhere else, by the way. Not really. So you've got this one just here. It is a spec paper, but describe and evaluate 2 studies of social influence. Just quite general. This one from a few years ago really threw the cat amongst the pigeons. Discuss ethical issues in social influence research. There is a model answer for that just here, by the way. And then finally, last year, outline 1 ethical issue that has arisen in social influence research, 2 marks. And then refer to 1 or more social influence studies in your answer. So be on the lookout for those sorts of questions, ones that don't fit. You're going to need to know the concept and the process of social influence research. You know, you're in the environment, it's real life, it is unethical a lot of the time. That does seem to be a theme they go for. Now, I'm going to keep these videos a bit shorter this time. However, I do just want to point out some of the questions that do come up for social influence processes, you know, like how do they ask questions, how do they approach it. They love a STEM, which makes sense. We've got a STEM on homosexuality, changing views. We've got a STEM on persuading people to eat more healthily, again, changing people's views. There is another one here about smoking. There's another one here about single-use plastics. They often like putting in STEMs about behaviours that, you know, in the last 20 years society has changed its viewpoint on, and then you have to explain how. Now, if you just AO1 those questions, you'll get nothing. Everything about this question just here about single-use plastics has to be about single-use plastics. So I don't know off the top of my head, if you just say what the augmentation principle is, you get 0. But if you say that, you know, there have been some environmentalist groups who have been quite extreme in the way they think, you know, Insulate Britain, Just Stop Oil, Greenpeace has been quite active, for example, and they've been pushing this agenda about environmental things we need to change, including plastic straws. They fit the augmentation principle because these activists are willing to go further than most people, doing self-sacrificial action in the name of saving the planet. So you have to constantly link back to the environment in this case. So that's it really for social influence. I'm not going through any of the content. There are loads of other videos for that. Social change process is probably something you want to think about. Likely gonna get a 16 marker, though again, you know, it could easily not come up. But I think on the balance of probability, you are slightly more likely going to get a 16 marker. Zimbardo and the named pieces of research are ones to look out for. But that is hopefully just a brief overview of social influence and maybe what to expect.